Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads, and welcome to video number 2 in my Stephen King week that I just made up for the fun of it because I wanted to talk about Stephen King books. At this point, I've read 17 out of his roughly 80 published books, and I say roughly because depending on which list you look at, you're somewhere between 75 and 85. I wanted to rank them from my least favorite to my favorite Stephen King book out of the ones that I've read so far. And slight spoiler alert, you will not find some of his most popular works on my list because those I haven't read yet. Out of the 17 books that I've read so far, 2 I will actually not be ranking. One, which is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, because that has been too long ago that I read it. That was actually my first or second Stephen King book that I've ever read. The other one is Rage, which he wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. That also has been one of the first books that I've read, and it has been too long that I don't remember a couple of the things that happened. Let's get to the actual rating. I have 15 Stephen King books that I want to talk with you about, so we better get started. Book number 15 on my list is Later, which I found incredibly boring, which is why it is on the last spot on my list. I remember reading it, and then I finished the book and was like, nothing happened. What is this book even about? I don't understand. I remember it is about a boy seeing ghosts, but it felt very convoluted. A lot of little things happened, but I never figured out what that potential overarching story was supposed to be, and I never cared about the kid or the people around it. It's the only Stephen King book that I ended with, well, this was boring. Book number 14 is The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which is the only short story collection that I've read by Stephen King so far. No worries, I will read the other ones as well. I'm just not a big short story reader, so, I need breaks between short story collections. Anyway, this one had a few really great short stories and then a few really meh short stories. So it was a rather neutral 3-star rating for me. There are definitely parts that I will remember and that I will keep thinking about, but then as it is in short story collections, right, there were just a couple that I did not enjoy as much. Book number 13 is Thinner. I read it twice, and the second time it didn't help either. I liked the idea. I didn't really like how it was written and how the story was told. I didn't really care too much about the things. I mean, I liked the idea, the curse, and I liked some of the characters, but the overall way of how the story was told just didn't do it really for me, if that makes sense. Number 12 is The Mist. And yes, it's actually part of a short story collection, but it was later published as a standalone novella. The Mist is about a small town that all of a sudden is covered by a mist, and people first think like, oh, that's a weird weather phenomenon, but they soon realize, nope, there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot of stuff going on inside the mist. This is one of the more horror books that I've read by him. I didn't know that when I started it, that it is technically a horror book with jump scare and, things going on in the mist. So it's not really something that I typically read because I'm a wimp. Plus, I felt it was too short. I mean, it's 200 and a little bit pages, and it didn't get enough development in some areas, which is why it ended up on spot number 12 on my list. Number 11 on my list is Blaze, another book that he wrote under the Richard Bachman pseudonym. Well, technically, it was one that he found in a drawer of Richard Bachman, but at that point, people already know that Stephen King and Richard Bachman is the same person. And this, I find, is one of the less typical Richard Bachman books. So Blaze, which is also the name of our main character, is someone who's not the brightest in the world, and that led to him being not abused is not the right word, but misused by people with not as great intentions to do, their bidding, mostly crime. And it ended up in him and his friend kidnapping a child, but his friend then dies and he is stuck with a child. What I loved about this book is it's not your typical villain story or crime story where you're hating the character. On the contrary, you're actually feeling for him. I actually started tearing up at points, which I don't do often with books as well. In typical Stephen King fashion, it doesn't go into the direction you think it goes. It's very well written. Again, one of the more fast-paced books, but that is one where he definitely pulled on my heartstrings and where I felt a lot more than I was expecting to feel Book number 10 in my Stephen King ranking is The Running Man, yet another Richard Bachman book. This one was tricky because I actually watched the movies first. I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. I love the cheesy movies. And I watched Running Man quite a few times throughout my life. And I read the book a lot later, just a year or two ago. I thought it was okay, but I didn't love it. And I think it's because I was not able to disassociate it from my movie experience. While the movie is relatively similar, it's not quite the same. And I was always expecting the things to happen like they happened in the movie, but of course they didn't. So the book is slightly different. The premise is the same. It's a dystopian world where you can join games, in this case a game where you're hunted, and if you survive the hunting, the game, you are the winner and you get a whole big prize and whatnot. So that is similar in the movie, but just how the hunting happens and how his escape happens is very different than in the movies. Plus the movie character I found very different than the book character, so I couldn't match those two up, which is probably not the case. So it's absolutely my reading experience with the book that led it to be put onto a number 10 spot. Number 9 is a book that I just recently finished, and that is The Chunker That Is Under the Dome. This is a story about a small town that wakes up one day and they're covered by like kind of an invisible dome that nothing can penetrate, just a little bit of air. You are observing the people in the town as they're dealing with the situation. What I loved about the book is that within 5 or 6 days in which the story takes place, you see a town go completely crazy, and this observing factor that's how kind of the book is written, that you're observing these characters while they're doing what they're doing. I love that aspect of it. I know the ending is a bit decisive. You either love it or hate it. I was actually rather neutral on the ending. I didn't care too much about it, but I didn't hate it either. What bugged me though was that people remembered specific things at a plot convenient moment. And it was so obvious at one point that is how he's moving the story forward that I was really annoyed by it. That was what actually made me move the book further down in my ranking. Book number 8 is a wild one. It's another Richard Bachman book, and that is The Regulators. This book is so weird. And I think that is another reason why I love Stephen King as an author, because he has so many weird things where I always sit there and wonder, like, where do you get this from? Where does this imagination come from? I mean, with some books, we know where it's coming from, but generally speaking, I'm always fascinated by all the ideas that he has and how well he can put them on paper. So The Regulators is a specific strait in a town that somehow all of a sudden finds themselves in a weird situation where like life-size toys are starting to shoot at them, or if they go in the backyard, they are all of a sudden in a desert setting. So reality is escaping them, and it is as wild as it sounds. So first of all, you get to meet those various characters that live in the street, which are all amazing and fantastic all on their own. And then you get this dynamic of, again, watching people deal with this ridiculous situation. And obviously you get, sides and people not trusting each other. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And I loved it. It was so much fun reading it. It was so ridiculous at times. But that's, as I said, that's what I love about King books. Spot number 7 for me is Fairy Tale, which is probably an unpopular opinion because generally speaking, I really love this book. I ate it up. I read it and read it and read it. And it was, I don't know, I was so excited. It was like laughing and yelling. Well, not literally, but I could have. I was having such a great time with this book till about the last, 3 or 4 chapters where I just wanted to throw it against the wall. That ending ruined the book for me. And I know me saying I loved the fairy tale is unpopular because a lot of people loved like the first 50 to 100 pages and they actually didn't like the parallel universe stuff. I love that stuff. Again, it was one of those ridiculous things that Stephen King came up with that I just enjoy. If he could just cut out these dumb endings that have zero effect on the plot. Book number 6 in my ranking is The Institute, a completely underrated Stephen King book in my opinion. By the way, if you want to hear more about that, check out my other video that I published in my Stephen King week earlier this week, because that's one of the books that I'm talking about in this video. This is about an institute where teenagers with superpowers like telekinesis and whatnot are being held, where they do experiments to draw out those supernatural abilities. So this is less a horror book. Again, no jump scare, horror type Stephen King stuff, not even a psychological horror where you dig deep into a character's motivation. This is a more plot-driven book with a paranormal setting kind of as its base. But it is so entertaining. I loved the plot. I loved the story. I loved everything about it. And there was nothing in the book that I did not like. Now we're getting into my top 5 Stephen King books out of the 17 that I've read. And spot number 5 has to go to Carrie, the first book he wrote. It is incredible, especially if you read this book and then you read more Stephen King books throughout his lifetime and you realize he has always been great at writing these ridiculous stories with amazing characters and, again, amazing teenage characters, which I find very surprising because I'm actually not in the age anymore where I want to read about teenagers and their problems. But Stephen King does it so well that I am enjoying them pretty much every single time. It is an incredibly well-told story. Just that rage, the anger that is coming with the book is so well transported in the story that you can't do anything else but feel for Carrie and kind of support her in what she's doing, even though, you know, she's going kind of in a wrong direction and not in a healthy direction of dealing with the situation. But I mean, that's kind of a theme with Stephen King, so you're just, you know, rolling with it. But again, great character study, fantastic, incredible, weird, and amazing plot, and just a roundabout amazing book that I, similar to others, want to read over and over again because it's just great. Book number 4 on my list goes to Gerald's Game, which is one of the weirdest Stephen King books I think that I've read. And I mean weird in the sense of the setting. So Gerald's Game is about a couple that wants to relive in their marriage because it has been boring, whatever. I don't know the details anymore because it is way more than 12 years ago that I've read this book, but I still remember vividly how it made me feel in some of those extreme situations. So they decide, you know, let's book a cabin, remote place in the side season so no one is around and we can really be on our own and do whatever it is we want. And what the husband wants to do is, well, you know, adults. She is not too excited about it and actually freaks out a little bit after she got handcuffed to the bed. I forgot the exact details, but he does something that freaks her out. So she pushes him off of the bed, and instead of just, you know, rolling off the bed, it's kind of a freak accident. I think he breaks his neck or something. So she handcuffed at the bed, he dead next to the bed, and that's what the book is about, like that situation and how she deals with it. What I love about this book is it's this very limited setting of that one room. And it's, again, just a couple of days that you're following her. And it's just a situation of her basically not being able to do anything else other than trying to get out of these handcuffs. And I vividly remember how I sat there and couldn't believe what's happening and couldn't believe what I was reading. It's so good. Also, one of the books that I urgently need to reread because I want to relive in, although that, again, what does it tell about me? And I want to read about something like this, but it's this voyeurism kind of, right? Seeing how other people suffer, and he writes it so incredibly well. We are getting into my top 3 Stephen King books out of the 17 that I've read throughout my life so far. And number 3 has to go to The Gunslinger. Looking at just The Gunslinger alone, it is such a cool book. It is weird. It is messed up. I don't really know if there's a purpose to this book, but that's what I enjoyed about it. It was just ridiculousness in paper form, and I celebrated it the entire way while I was reading it, and I just thought it was the coolest thing that I've ever read in my life, and I don't know why people hate this book. We'll see when I get along. Maybe I will hate it at a later point too, but just having this book in a silo, I loved it. I'm here for this ridiculousness that is The Gunslinger. Book number 2 on my list has been my favorite for the longest time and has only just recently in the last year or two been kicked from my top 1 by a different book. But book number 2 is The Long Walk. Again, another Richard Bachman book. I am enjoying this book and I enjoyed it as much when I read it the second time. So The Long Walk is a dystopian world where teenage boys can join the long walk, in which the winner gets whatever they want to wish for. But in order to win, you have to be the last man walking, aka you cannot be dead. And it's literally about all of these teenagers walking for however many pages this book is, and what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, how their life is during this walk. Again, it's well-written teenagers that you can't end up but caring for, even though I've never been a teenage boy, but I feel it's written in a very authentic manner. I can believe that that's what boys in a situation like this would think about and would talk about and would go through. And it's just, again, this voyeurism, watching people go through a really shitty situation that is so well done in this book. Followed by the book that kicked The Long Walk from the top 1, where it has been since I started reading Stephen King, or since I started reading The Long Walk, rather. And that is Roadwork, the only missing Richard Bachman book on this list. Roadwork has been such a fantastic read for me. So first of all, it's a book about a man who lives a rather regular life. Nothing exciting ever happens, but he's okay with it. Till one day, there's a highway that's supposed to be built through the place where he works, which results in him losing his job and a couple of other things, and how he deals with that. So plot-wise, nothing really happens, which is the biggest criticism about this book, which I'm okay with. I don't necessarily need a plot as long as I have a character that I can, suck myself into. And that's what we get here. This is the best character study that I've ever read in my life. I love following our main character as he is doing more and more ridiculous things, trying to stop all of this from happening because he loves his regular life, but he doesn't deal with it in a healthy way. So it is awesome. I love this book so much. I love this character description so much. And again, it's, as I've said it before, it's this watching people do dumb shit. That's really what this is. And that is the best example of something like this ever. Alrighty, guys, what do you think about my list? What are your favorite Stephen King books? Maybe name one that is not one of his popular ones. What is your favorite non-popular Stephen King book? I would love to know down in the comments. And then if you haven't already, check out my other video from my Stephen King week where I talk about his, in my opinion, 3 most underrated books. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button right down here. And then I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you with my next video. Bye!